This episode of CppCast is sponsored by Incredibuild. Accelerate your C++ build by up to 30 times faster directly from within Visual Studio 2017. Just make sure to check the Incredibuild box in the C++ Workload VS 2017 setup. And by JetBrains, maker of intelligent development tools to simplify your challenging tasks and automate the routine ones. JetBrains is offering a 25% discount for an individual license on the C++ tool of your choice, CLion, ReSharper C++, or AppCode. Use the coupon code JetBrains for CppCast during checkout at jetbrains.com. Episode 96 of CppCast with guest Sara Chipps, recorded April 7th, 2017. In this episode, we discuss choosing some C++ over C. Then we talk to Sara Chipps, founder and CEO of Jewelbots. Sara talks to us about getting young girls interested in programming through Jewelbots and Arduino. Welcome to episode 96 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It is April 7th, and as I discovered this morning, today is National Beer Day, Jason.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And, I kind of thought it was one of those like fake holidays, like a Pirate Day, but I looked into it, and it's a real holiday, and it celebrates that towards the end of Prohibition, they passed a law allowing low alcohol beer, and that was done on April 7th, 1933.
Okay, so, but this isn't like, I'm not supposed to be taking off work today, right?
No, it's not a real like holiday, but it is a real thing that we have for a reason. It's not just some made-up internet thing.
So are we celebrating today?
I'm celebrating. I got a local beer here. It's Aviator Brewing Company down the street from me in Fuquay, Verena, Hog Wild IPA.
Sounds
you got
good.
Anything?
I don't at the moment, but I'm going to pretend like I'm drinking my probably second favorite beer, which is Mikkeller Beer Geek Breakfast Stout.
Okay, yeah, because it is still kind of the AM for you.
It's
right?
breakfast time for me pretty much at the moment, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at the top of our episode, we'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, we got a comment on our episode from a while ago with IncludeOS. And this is from Olumide saying, gripping podcast. I normally work while I listen to podcasts. I could hardly work while listening to this one. Had to pay extra attention to every word. Gonna listen again and maybe again. Keep up the good work, Fred. Seriously looking forward to the multi-threaded version. IncludeOS was a great episode. It was a while ago, but really amazing stuff they're doing with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Was that back before CppCon?
I believe it was right before CppCon because we met Alfred at CppCon and talked more about it.
Yeah, it sounds right. Been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. I'm wondering if they've had any progress with getting multi-threading into there.
I haven't really been following the news, but I should check on it again.
Yeah, well, Olamide, thanks for reaching out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. So joining us today is Sara Chipps. Sara is a JavaScript developer based in New York City. She's been working on software in the open source community since 2001. She's been obsessed with hardware and part of Nodebots since 2012. She is the CEO of Jewelbots, a company dedicated towards drastically changing the number of girls entering STEM fields using hardware. She was formerly the CTO of Flatiron School, a school dedicated to teaching people of all ages how to build software and launch careers as software developers. And in 2010, she co-founded Girl Develop It, a nonprofit focused on helping more women become software developers. Girl Develop It is in 45 cities and has taught over 17,000 women how to build software. Sara, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me. That's a long bio.
It's shorter than some.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
So, I mean, we'll get into this later, but it feels like a little bit of a disconnect to be obsessed with hardware and a JavaScript developer.
Yeah, well, it turns out there's this awesome library called Johnny Five, like the robot. Do you remember the robot?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the best. And it was made by a guy named Rick Waldron that allows you to compile JavaScript down to something that Arduino can understand. So that's kind of how I got into hardware. It's a great first step for people because, as I'm sure you guys know, usually when you're writing firmware, you're writing C or C++. And so that can be difficult when it's not the language that you're used to. It's definitely, JavaScript syntax can be a little bit more beginner friendly. So that's how I got involved in hardware to begin with, is discovering Johnny Five, and then from there I got deeper and deeper.
That's great. We're probably going to have to dig into Johnny Five some more later when we get to the bulk of the meat of the interview here, I think.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, we got a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, Sarah, and then we'll start talking to you more about Jewelbots and Arduino and Johnny Five, okay?
That sounds great.
Okay, so this first one is the C++ annotations, and it looks like it's coming from a university professor, and it's his kind of document that he teaches off of, and it's you're shaking your head at me, Jason.
Oh, I'm just looking. I mean, he's been working on it for 23 years. That's why I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool how he's been keeping it up to date with all the new features being added to the language. So it just recently got updated for 2017. It has a bunch of features that are going to be in C++ 2017. And you can actually get a hard copy of this if you want to read it. I don't think it's available as a book, but you can print it out. And it's just a good source for users of C who want to get into C++, I think is kind of the target audience.
But it goes all the way down, variadic templates, partial specialization of templates. I mean, I didn't seem to be leaving anything out.
Yeah, I was pretty floored by how detailed it is. And, how there's no stone left unturned, it feels like.
Yeah, very, very in-depth. Although I did look at some of the comments on Reddit in response to this getting posted, and there were a couple people who picked it apart a little bit as being outdated. There was one comment that it talks about like compiler availability on Windows, and it only talks about Cygwin and using that to compile for GCC. Obviously, we have MinGW or Visual Studio these days.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine, as large as this is and as long as it's been maintained, it would be like maintaining a large code base. You moved your code from C++ 98 to C++ 14, but there's still going to be pieces left behind that you didn't quite get to yet.
Right. So maybe he's focused more on updating, for new C++ features, not necessarily updating the entire document, which would make sense.
Perhaps.
Okay, this next article we added is a post on Medium from David Strauss. And this is kind of in the same line of thinking with that last one about choosing some C++ over C. And I'm guessing this is coming from maybe an embedded developer. And he's talking about, we've talked several times on the show about C developers maybe not trusting C++ and not wanting to get into object-oriented development. And this is basically saying, you don't have to use any of the features you don't want, but you should be using C++ in order to avoid some of the several deficiencies with C.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the article says you don't have to use those features.
Sure.
And I think what the author means to say is you don't have to write code to the... like, you don't have to implement your own templates. You don't have to throw your own exceptions. But his examples are using lambdas and standard vector and things that are templates and can possibly throw exceptions and are using some of the higher level features of C++.
So some C developers might still be wary.
It might
what
be.
you're saying.
But I mean, I like the approach that he takes, like showing how much easier it is to create a callback with a lambda instead of doing this void pointer nonsense that we're used to in C.
Yeah, he's using curl as an example there and talking about how, you need to define a struct and pass the struct along as a void pointer. And it's just so much easier to use a more C++ style, way of handling this.
Right.
Yeah. And one other thing that he pointed out at the bottom of the article, which I wasn't aware of, is that this is kind of what GCC does, that they moved to C++ beginning in 2008, but they're really, they started off as C, and they're not using all of the C++ features. They're using a subset to make things easier and avoid some of the things he talked about in this article. And so I wasn't aware of that. I kind of assumed GCC was already built in C++, or always was, but apparently it was C up until 2008.
I remember some of the news.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Next one, we have a article about C++ 18 coming next year. And obviously, this was a April Fool's joke. I'm not sure if anyone really got tricked by this one, but C++ 18 features coming: modules, concepts, ranges, coroutines, contracts, and possibly transactional memory. So it's basically all the list of things that people thought were going to make it into C++ 17 and didn't. And so he did kind of have a follow-up saying, maybe we should have done this with C++ 18, but I think the committee's sticking to the 3-year cycles.
I think so.
Okay, as someone that is not very deep in the C++ community or the development of C++, I was fooled. I was like, oh, this is so nice.
Well, it is a nice feature list. Hopefully we'll get it in 3 years, just not next year.
Yeah.
It's actually... Yeah, sorry. That's actually the second way I was fooled. I was also fooled. Apparently, Spotify does April Fools every year, and I had no idea. And I told at least a dozen people that Spotify was bought by Google for $41 billion. Until someone was like, "Yeah, no."
I was a little disappointed by April Fools this year because it was on a Saturday. I feel like maybe I just wasn't paying attention as much, but I was a little disappointed by some of the things I saw. Although I did watch the Google Gnome video. That was pretty funny.
I didn't see that one. I saw Stack Overflows. I forget what it was now, but it was funny.
It was Stack Overflow's the dance authentication?
Yeah, that's it. That was great. Yeah.
What Google did with Google Gnome was it was kind of like the Alexa Google Home type thing, only it was shaped like a garden gnome. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and you had to ask it outdoor questions. Like it wouldn't respond to you if you tried to add something to your shopping list. It's like, no, that's an indoor thing. I can't do that.
Yeah. I have no interest in a device that's listening 24 hours a day in my house like this. I'm definitely in that camp of people. But, I might get the Google Gnome. That sounds more interesting.
And you don't talk about confidential things outside. So.
Right, What's the weather? It can tell me stuff like that.
Okay, and then the last article, which I think we talked about a little bit 2 weeks ago, is Pacific C++, and this is the first major C++ conference in the Asia-Pacific region.
Yes.
And Jason, you are going to be there as the second day keynote.
Yes.
And also Chandler Kruth will be the first day keynote. It looks like they haven't announced any of the other speakers yet, right?
Right, and they did a call for speakers, which the submissions close on May 19th. So if you have any interest in speaking there, get your submission submitted.
Awesome. Okay, so Sarah, why don't we start off by you telling us exactly what Jewelbots is and how you got started on the project?
Yeah, awesome. So Jewelbots are smart, programmable friendship bracelets that are designed to inspire girls to code. I got started on Jewelbots. It's been about 3.5 years. And I started Jewelbots as, I've always had a real passion for wanting to get a more diverse group of people to be building software because I love it. I've loved having a career in software, and I feel like it's such a powerful thing to be able to tell computers what to do, and and so I've always kind of tried to figure out how we can change that. And I really found that a lot of adult women that I would talk to that weren't engineers would say things like, I didn't even know what an engineer was until I got to college, or, and when I was there, I just didn't think it was something for me. And then when I talked to my male peers, that had found it earlier, what I often heard from them is that they got into programming when they were in their preteen years because of gaming. How did you both get into programming?
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of pretty early history, but my family got a TI-99, and then my brother bought a Commodore 64, so we're talking 80s. And my brother was interested in programming, so he's 6 years older than me. I would sit in his lap, and he would teach me programming stuff, and it's just kind of always been a part of my life in some regard.
That's so neat. How old were you? You must have been small if you were sitting in his lap.
Yeah, that would have been... The first programming that I recall doing on my own was in second grade, and that was probably kindergarten.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't get into it as young as Jason was, but I did take a Visual Basic class in high school, and I was very interested in gaming at a young age, and I think I may have done some, modding tools, which was some basic programming back in the day. Yeah.
Were you writing Quake mods in Quake script?
No, not Quake mods. Neverwinter Nights, I think, was what I did.
But seriously, to bring up what Sarah was saying, I actually met a fair number of my friends in college who were not in computer science or engineering fields, got an interest in programming because of Quake.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense. The new, the new Quake is Minecraft.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of 8-year-old server admins running around right now because of Minecraft. Yeah, so I often heard, and my story is similar. I was 11 when I got. I think that there was a lot of people, maybe in our generation. It sounds like we're a similar age group that got into programming as a way to make friends. And so I found BBSs when I was young. I was a homeschool kid, and so talking to other people was very exciting to me. So I ended up helping to run a local BBS, and then I took a C++ class in in high school actually, that I really loved. And I was like, wait, I think like this, and you can do this as a job. This is pretty neat. So what I wanted to do is kind of like figure out if there's, because we tell girls to learn to code now a lot, and kids to learn to code, but that's boring, and we also tell kids to learn math, and that's boring. And, to find something that they love, to like build something that's something they love and that they can make better via code, is great. Kind of like Quake, or I remember when MySpace came out, and for like the first time ever, it was cool to my friends that I knew how to code. Up until then, it was like very embarrassing, but like they were so excited because I could make them like their flashy, glittery pages. And they didn't know how to do that. So we kind of wanted to make something like that. So we went to a whole bunch of schools. We talked to dozens and dozens of girls, a few hundred. And we had an idea of what we were going to build. We were going to build a bracelet that you could change color to match your outfit. And we would talk to girls about that, and they were like, "Oh, that's dumb." Like, oh, okay. And so we would talk to them about what they do like, and it's just such a big time in their lives for friendships. It's so important to them, and they already wear friendship bracelets. And when I started talking about like a bracelet you could use to send secret messages to your friends, they started really freaking out. So that's what we built. It took us a couple years, but we just started shipping in November. And now there are 8-year-olds writing C++, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
That is really cool. So I want to dig more into Jewelbots, but just on the topic of like STEM and girls, I've noticed there's like more products available these days, or at least there's an effort to have more. I have a young daughter, and we recently got her some Goldie Blocks toys. Are there other things like that are kind of appealing to that, to STEM for girls type thing?
Yeah, Goldie Blocks is excellent. There's also something called Ruminate that is like a dollhouse kit for girls that age.
Sounds like
There's a
fun to
lot
me.
of, what'd you say?
I said that sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, right? Yeah. There's another one. This is like more gender neutral. It's called Codapillar. It's by Fisher Price. And I have a nephew and he is 6 and he loves his Codapillar.
That's like a programmable robot caterpillar?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's basically logic based. So like you get these like body segments for this caterpillar and it'll be like one will be the turn left segment and then you can put it before or after the go straight segment. And then there's like a music segment and then you just set them up and then you let them go. And the caterpillar just kind of runs in a loop. It's neat because I always get them the coding toys. I'm always like shoving it down their throats. And this is the first one that he like really loves. He plays with it every time I see him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Reminds me
Okay,
of,
so
oh, sorry,
go ahead, Jason.
It reminds me of some toys that I remember being around in like in the 80s, maybe early 90s, like cars and stuff that you could just like press forward, left, right, forward, left, right, whatever, then hit run program and it would do what you did. It only had like 4 buttons on the entire thing.
That's interesting. And was it branded as something that would learn to help you learn to code, or was it just like this is a car?
I think it was just branded as a car, and I've never tried to find that kind of thing again, but I distinctly remember it existing. Hopefully, it wasn't just in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting. A lot of them are like learn to code for young ones, and they're like more like learn logic, which makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting that there were ones that were like that weren't branded that way.
Right.
Okay, so one question I had about the bracelets themselves was on the website it says they don't have GPS, yet you're doing some type of location-based notifications when one of your friends is nearby. How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so they use Bluetooth to detect each other. It's the only wearable that uses Bluetooth to go from device to device instead of device to phone. And it's interesting, we're not allowed to say Bluetooth on the website without paying them a lot of money. So we just kind of have to hint at it.
Right.
That is interesting.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I didn't know that you could use, I'm assuming it's like some Bluetooth LE or something so that you're not sucking the battery all the time, but I didn't know you could use that to communicate between devices like that.
Yeah, it does like polling, just kind of every few microseconds to say like, is there a Jewelbot nearby? Is there a Jewelbot nearby? And so that's, and if it is, it reacts and sends each other tiny messages that way too.
Okay.
Okay, so how exactly do girls interact with the bracelets? It looks like there is an iOS and Android app, but then you're also saying, you can code C++ with Arduino, right?
Yeah, so out of the box, they can pair the bracelet. They don't need a phone. They don't need anything. Basically, you use the button and you pair your bracelets and you pick a friendship color. And then whenever you're near each other, your bracelets turn that color and you can send secret messages using lights and vibrations. And then if they want to get more, we wanted to make something that worked out of the box and they didn't have to code it.
Okay.
And if they want to code it, they can plug it into their laptops or desktops and use the Arduino programming environment to code their Jewelbot to do different things. And they can code everything from, just using the lights, the button, and the vibrations to do things that they come up with, or things like if I'm near these 3 friends, then my bracelet acts this way. When we first see each other, they go in rainbow animations, and then it does X, Y, Z. And so that's been, the friendship code is something we actually just released, which is something they've been having a lot of fun with.
So it has a vibration motor, multiple lights, it sounds like, and some buttons that they can program and interact with?
Yeah, so there's one button, there's 4 RGB LEDs,
Oh, 4, wow.
a vibration motor, and then the microprocessor.
Okay. I'm thinking 4 RGB LEDs, that's a lot of possibilities, actually, for what you could do.
Right? There's all these colors.
Yeah, like for real. Yeah.
So, I don't think I've ever used Arduino, but Arduino is based on C++, and there's a separate Arduino library. Do you have any idea what version of C++ you can use when you're writing Arduino programs?
Actually, that's a really good question that I don't have the answer for, and that's something I did mean to look up. Basically, what Arduino does is they've written their own libraries to make it a bit easier. And I keep saying the word easy and hard when I'm referring to C++. It's not. I don't. It's just. I'm sure. I don't know if you. Well, I don't think it's a really beginner-friendly language. I think it's a really powerful language. And in fact, in the way that now that I am coding C++, a lot more often than I'm doing JavaScript, I feel awesome. But basically, syntactically, it can be difficult for a beginner to jump in and get really active without messing some things up. So they did some work to make the programming specifically for Arduino a little more beginner friendly by making libraries that do things like microprocessor dot lights dot on type of thing.
So it works with the standard Arduino IDE, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that is GCC 4.9 for
Got
our
it.
listeners. So that's most of C++ 14, but not all of it, I believe.
Okay. I just Googled it and found a Stack Overflow post that looks like it's a bit dated, but it said back in July 2014, you could specifically target C++ 11, and it was expected that by later that year, they would have C++ 11 by default. So maybe 11 is by default, and you can target 14 explicitly?
Maybe. I haven't used it.
Yeah, I'm reading the same post.
Okay. So what are some of the cooler programs you've seen girls make with the Arduino C++ for Jewelbots?
Some of my number one favorite is a metronome. Like a girl for her cello lessons, she or practicing her cello, she programmed it so when she hits the button, she can get some different cadence on her Jewelbot and just the vibrations. So that her metronome doesn't have to be out loud; it's on her wrist. That's one of those things. I knew they would come up with things that we hadn't thought of, and that was one of the things that I was like, "Oh wow, you can use it for that. That's neat." A lot of the friendship stuff is cool. I don't know how old your daughter is, but do you know what Musical.ly is?
I do not. My daughter is 5.5.
Yeah. Okay. So Musical.ly, I think, is something we'll all know about in a couple of years. It's funny because one thing I've learned about this demographic, or realized that this demographic, is they're the ones that pick all the stuff that we like a few years later, like Snapchat and Instagram and, like the pop music that we listen to. So right. Musical.ly for them is the new hottest thing. And they just make tiny music videos. It's definitely one of those things as an adult that you're like, all right, well, why don't you just use any of the other platforms that you could do that on? But no, they love this Musical.ly. We have girls making Musical.lys where like their Jewelbot lights up to their favorite song and they do these like little dances, which is cool. So those are really fun. They come up with all kinds of fun stuff, which is really neat because we like stuff that we don't think about, and we're always surprised by them.
So how does that work? Do they like program in the lights and everything for the entire sequence of the song, or is it somehow respond to the music that is being played?
They do it for the sequence of the song, though when you have Musical.ly, it's like I think it's more than 6 seconds. It's only a couple seconds. So they do, they'll do like part of the song.
Okay.
All
right, so maybe if I could just take a step back, you were saying that you think of C++ as not terribly beginner friendly from a syntax perspective, but the tools are open up for C++. So where do you see the role of C and C++ in like learning how to program compared to your history with JavaScript?
Yeah, I think that. So I learned first C++ first, and I think C++ is a great first language to learn. especially as you're learning a lot of important things like pointers and a little bit about memory management and that kind of thing, which really helps you understand, helps you understand how a compiler works and what it's doing for you, which a lot of the languages like JavaScript and Ruby and things like that do for you.
Right.
I think people are kind of starting to lose the understanding of what happens, when you're compiling code. So I don't think C++ is going anywhere. I think we're doing a lot of work to make it, for our age group, learning about things like that is very difficult, because we're talking about 10, 11-year-olds. So at least starting with the, jewelbots.led, and passing values like colors and microseconds, I think for them is a lot easier to understand. So I think like a slow getting started and then learning about more advanced concepts is the way to do it.
So you think it's fair to say that C++ gives you the ability to give them these high-level constructs to work with so they don't have to worry about those details?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And just out of curiosity, what's like some of the younger audience, like how young of a Jewelbots user have you seen programming with the Arduino part of it?
I think 8 is kind of so playing with the device like 5 or 6 is, because like it's easy to understand, you could run around, but 8 is kind of the lowest, like the youngest we've been able to see of actually like building something, which is pretty neat. Yeah. Usually around 10, 11 is where our core audience is. Okay.
And you want to tell us a little bit more about Johnny 5, this JavaScript to C++ project you were telling us about?
Yeah. So Johnny 5 has been around for a little while, and it's given birth to a movement called Nodebots. But Johnny 5, I guess it was released in 2012, and it's used in addition with Serial Port, which is another library that allows you to communicate from using not like from terminal or something else and compile to your Arduino, so you don't have to use the Arduino IDE.
Okay.
And so basically, it uses JavaScript as a driver and builds drivers for different either components of a board or different boards. There is Johnny 5 for working with all kinds of devices like drones, and you can work with the Microsoft Kinect, which is very cool. So it's a project that's been going for a long time. People really like it.
Okay, and obviously we're glad to hear that your Jewelbots users are using C++. But is that an option for them too, that they could use Johnny 5 for Jewelbots?
Yeah, that's definitely on the timeline, or definitely on the roadmap somewhere down the road, is to give it a try. There's definitely not room on our microprocessor for a compiler for something like JavaScript. So in order to use Johnny 5, it would have to be either tethered to a laptop or do something over Bluetooth. So that's something we're going to look into. I think the next step for us, so right now it's a pretty steep jump from I'm using this bracelet to send secret messages to I'm writing C. And or C++ rather. So we want to do something in the middle. So we're talking about doing like a drag and drop interface on the app as a next step. And then they can get even deeper because the drag and drop will introduce them to important concepts. And once they understand that, they can say, oh, I can actually edit this further. So I think that's step next.
I wanted to interrupt this discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Incredibuild dramatically reduces compilation and development times with a unique process virtualization technology. The tech transforms your computer network into a virtual supercomputer and lets each workstation use hundreds of idle cores across the network. Use Incredibuild to accelerate much more than just C++ compilations. speed up your unit tests, run more development cycles, and scale your development to the cloud to unleash unreal speeds. Join more than 100,000 users to save hundreds of monthly developer hours using existing hardware. Incredibuild is already integrated into Visual Studio 2017. Just make sure to check the Incredibuild box in the C++ workload in the Visual Studio 2017 setup.
I'm kind of curious what the getting started process is like. I know you said you can use it without having a computer or any device to pair it with, but say like I get a Jewelbot and my goal is to immediately plug it in and start programming with it. What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm going to put a link. So we just revamped our docs. So I'm going to put a link into chat.
Sure.
Okay.
So you guys can take a look. So if you see anything wrong, let me know because I coded this whole thing. And I hate CSS. I can't even tell you. It's the worst.
Okay, so this is your support page, and we'll definitely put this in the show notes.
Yeah, great. But if you go to under Friends and Pairing, you can see, so the way they pair the device is they hold down the button for 2 complete seconds. And if it's near, it looks for another device within 2 feet. So if there's another device in pairing mode that's 2 feet away or less, it will, they'll both understand that they'll do like a little handshake and they'll say, okay, we're trying to, these 2 devices are trying to pair. So one goes into the color selecting mode, which will start displaying different colors you can choose for friendship. And that user hits the button again to pick their friendship color. And then both devices start lighting up their friendship color to confirm. And then from that point forward, those devices are paired.
Okay.
And then I see there's a Learn to Code section here where it talks about getting the Arduino IDE.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was actually one of the... Have either of you done much Arduino coding?
I've looked into it. I have not had any actually yet.
So one thing that we have learned as part of this process is that the Arduino IDE is a wonderful and very powerful open source tool that a lot of people have used. However, it's not the easiest thing to install always. There are operating systems it doesn't work with, specifically like certain versions of Mac, of OS X rather, certain versions of Windows that give it a little trouble. So as part of the process, we've kind of learned, okay, here are the common things that you run into. So we've tried to like cover those in our docs.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Girl Develop It, the other program you started?
Yeah, Girl Develop is kind of what inspired this whole thing. 'Cause I heard a lot from our students, things like they wish they had known this when they were younger. Mm-hmm. And Girl Develop It started as just some classes. This was in 2010. A friend of mine and I were talking about how in our computer science classes, we often felt nervous about asking questions. I think that everyone can relate to the experience when you're the only person like you in a room, right? Mm-hmm. I often think of this great picture I've seen online of like a graduating class of nurses. And there's like all these really stoked and excited female nurses, obviously having a great time. And then just like one guy in the middle, like very straight faced, like I think, I think everyone can relate to like, okay, I'm the only one like me here. And so it's like the spotlight is on me. And so I think we often felt uncomfortable asking questions in class because we would be like, man, is this something I should know? Am I going to look stupid if I ask this? So we ended up not asking some questions that might have been really helpful. So we were like, what if we could just do a class where we like encouraged people to ask really stupid questions. So that's what we did. And we scheduled one class. It was HTML, CSS. We thought we'd have to like invite family members because we didn't think anyone would want to come. And this is on meetup.com. And it ended up, we charged, I think, $20 a person for the class, and it ended up selling out in under a day. And we were like, wow, this is cool. And a lot of people came and they learned a bunch, and we were like, well, we should do more of these. And then it very quickly grew to doing a whole bunch of classes in New York. People from other cities reached out to us and were like, we want to start in our city. And so we started doing a chapter model where people could open different chapters. And now Girl Develop It has taught over 50,000 students and is in more than 50 cities in the US. So it's pretty awesome to see how it's growing.
So I thought this was just like a user group community, but it sounds like it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, it's classes, and it's classes for people that are adults that have jobs. So it's like it's like 7 p.m., that kind of thing. And usually it's around $20 a class, and usually there's a series of 4 classes, so that's $80. But it's designed to be really accessible, like really affordable, and open to people that might not have time during the day to take off and do a class.
Okay, so kind of the target audience is mostly women who maybe want to get into a programming career but are doing something else right now.
Yeah, so it attracts. We actually have 15% male students, which I think is the biggest compliment, because they have to take a class called Girl Develop It. So that's really neat. So it's mostly for people in tech. What we found is it really appeals to people in tech adjacent roles.
Like
we
IT?
call it. So that means like product managers, or people that might be in a company that is very tech forward, that might work near developers but not as a developer, as a way for them to understand how better to communicate with those developers. There is a percentage that start Girl Develop It classes and then become a software developer, which is amazing. One of my best friends now, she took all our classes in the beginning, and now she is a design and front-end development lead at Thoughtbot, which is pretty neat. So there are a lot of people that become software developers full-time, but often I think the majority of people really just want to learn how to code and like how to do the stuff that they see other people doing. Okay.
And are you teaching all sorts of languages, or only specific things like JavaScript, or are you teaching everything?
Everything. Usually the thing that is the curriculum is open source on GitHub, and usually the thing stopping us from teaching something is not having the curriculum. So someone in the city will build it and open source it, and then we can teach that class kind of everywhere.
Wow.
Okay. So if Jason wanted to teach a C++ class to Girl Develop It, he could maybe do that?
Yeah. What city are you in?
Denver.
Denver. I'm sure there's a Girl Develop It Denver.
Maybe.
I'm going to look.
No idea.
Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly it. When people want to teach a class, they just need to reach out to their local chapter.
Huh.
Very cool. Okay, well, is there anything else maybe we haven't touched on yet with either Girl Develop It or with Jewelbots that you wanted to bring up?
Only that, yes, there is Girl Develop It Denver, just so you know.
Okay.
I'll send you the link. The only thing is everything in Jewelbots is open source. So if anyone wants to jump in, there's all of our firmware is open and available. So people have started working on cool stuff like the ability to pass in an RGB value instead of, right now we have it set up so we've programmed a few colors, but there are some things that would definitely make things easier. So if anyone has any questions, pull requests are welcome. Definitely feel free to reach out with any questions about what we're doing. And I know we're going to be doing some worldwide hack nights, like once a month over maybe Google Hangouts or another platform. So if anyone wants to get started, that's probably an easy way to do it.
Okay, and your library that you're referring to, that's a C++ library, I'm guessing?
Yep. So that's in our GitHub. It's the Arduino library, or the Friendship library is what you'd be looking for.
So if our listeners want to go buy a Jewelbot, how do they do that?
So right now, you can only get them on Target.com because we are sold out. We're making our next run of Jewelbots now. So Target.com, and then in about a month and a half, Jewelbots.com again.
Very cool. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in. Or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. I'd also appreciate if you like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at LeftKiss on Twitter. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.